Details of the federal government's much talked about carbon tax will finally be revealed on Sunday, as the Prime Minister Julia Gillard starts selling the biggest policy initiative of her political career. Big industries and households in Tasmania will be dissecting the detail. Tasmania's trade-exposed industries are hoping promised compensation will be enough to maintain their competitiveness, while the renewable energy sector is getting ready to celebrate what's being promised as a financial windfall. Lucy Shannon reports.
These wind turbine parts sitting on Hobart's wharf could represent Tasmania's future. The promise is that the state's renewable energy sector will be the big winner from putting a price on carbon pollution.
And is that something that you're looking forward to?
Absolutely. It's a good future, a positive future.
Rick Perrin runs a business that helps get wind energy projects off the ground.
Where might we see this wind turbine?
We have a number of sites in Tasmania that we could potentially put the turbine on. It'll very much depend on what the best wind regime is, because it's very sensitive, the amount of money you make from them, to the wind regime.
At the moment, the economics of wind projects don't always add up.
The cost of the machinery that you purchase, the cost of installation, and of course the price that you get for your output. Those are the key factors.
For years, Hydro Tasmania's massive Muscle Row Bay wind proposal has been talked about, but it's never come to fruition. A carbon tax should mean the blades will soon start turning.
The carbon price, by increasing the sort of wholesale price that they'll earn for their electricity, will make those projects much more viable. Anyone who wants to create a new renewable energy project in the state will not have to pay the carbon price and will be able to get a financial benefit compared to all of our competitors on the mainland.
Tasmania's traditional industries are not feeling so upbeat. Hobart Zinc Smelter employs about 600 people. It's a long way from its main market, China, but the low cost of power in Tasmania has kept it producing hundreds of thousands of tonnes of zinc every year for nearly a century. The smelter's general manager, Jeremy Coe, has one simple fear.
If we've got a carbon price and our competitors don't have a carbon price, then that reduces our ability to compete.
The unique situation in Tasmania is the vast majority of energy is already renewable, hydropower. So while the zinc smelter might be energy intensive, it's not using high levels of carbon polluting fossil fuels. That sounds like good news for them. Renewable energy won't attract a carbon tax. But Tasmania is part of the national energy market. So regardless of the hydropower, prices for consumers are set to go up in line with the rest of the country.
A big industrial company will be in a similar boat in Tasmania as compared to anywhere else, because they will have to pay that increased electricity pool price.
What we want to avoid is the perverse outcome where you would see a business like ours become non-competitive and replaced by production capacity which is generated from higher intensity carbon electricity production.
Jeremy Coe's local Member of Parliament is an influential ally in Canberra.
High emission trade exposed industries such as the zinc works need to be treated fairly, because yes, they need to clean up their act, but the jolt must not be so great that they're put out of business and those 600 workers are put out of a job.
Rio Tinto Alcan's aluminium smelter at Bell Bay in northern Tasmania employs about 500 people. Due to the high temperatures required, the smelter never sleeps. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's pushing out tonnes of aluminium. To do that, it consumes a whopping 1/3 of all of Tasmania's power.
Now, the carbon price is going to impact on the price of power in Tasmania, even though it's hydro-based, because the price of power is going to go up all around Australia, and Tasmania is linked to that grid. So the impact of that will be to reduce the competitiveness of the Bell Bay smelter.
The federal government has promised compensation to trade-exposed industries like Tasmania's aluminium and zinc smelters. Just how much they'll receive has been a sticking point amongst members of the multi-party Climate Change Committee, which has spent months behind closed doors trying to agree on just how carbon pricing will work. Green Senator for Tasmania, Christine Milne, sits on the committee.
For a long time, those companies have benefited from bulk power contracts where they have paid considerably less than all the rest of Tasmanians who've subsidised them. So yes, I recognise there'll be an impost on the big polluters. They will pay a carbon price for the power that they use because we are now linked to a national electricity grid and we are importing brown coal power from the mainland.
With low-income households reeling from Tasmania's power price increases in recent years, she pledges that ensuring they're compensated is her #1 priority. While there's no announcement until Sunday, the federal government is promising to protect 90% of people and says 3 million of those will be overcompensated. Christine Milne is confident the carbon tax will benefit the state overall, but she says the decision 8 years ago to join the national grid through the Basslink undersea cable has reduced the renewable advantages.
It was a bad decision, remains a bad decision, and the high costs of energy in Tasmania now are as a result of the $90 million that Tasmania has to pay for the rent of that cable every year.
Successive Labor governments have argued that Basslink has drought-proofed Tasmania, allowing the importation of interstate power to avoid blackouts. But the $90 million annual fee to rent the cable drags down Hydro Tasmania's already lacklustre bottom line. But that could all change under a carbon tax. As the giant of the renewables sector, Hydro Tasmania looks set to reap major rewards. It won't pay a carbon tax for the energy it produces, and in addition to that advantage, it will be able to sell its power on at increased market prices.
How big that gain is depends on what the price of carbon will be, and of course we don't know that yet. But look, it could be a very substantial number, many times the annual profit, let's say, of some of our existing companies today.
The Premier, Lara Giddings, hasn't actively supported a carbon tax, but says she doesn't oppose one either. She's cautious about talk of a boon for Hydro Tasmania.
At this point, I don't think we actually know the details as to what sort of rewards might be provided in recognition of the fact that we are a renewable energy state. Part of the concern has been that investment in renewable energy that's been done in the past will not necessarily count, or the fact that forests that are in reserve already may not necessarily count towards compensation that you may get.
When the federal government's key climate change advisor, Professor Ross Garnaut, was in Tasmania in March, he was clear Hydro Tasmania would gain a windfall. He said people in Tasmania will find themselves compensated like other Australians for the price increase, but the Tasmanian government will get a nice bonus in the increased profitability of Tas Hydro.
We're really interested to hear from both Hydro and the state government how that could potentially benefit all Tasmanians.
Overall, climate change policy expert Phil Harrington says modelling has shown Tasmania will be better off under a carbon tax. He says within a decade the state could be back producing 100% renewable energy.
This could be a major benefit that no other state in Australia, and indeed very few other countries around the world, can compete with. If Tasmania is able to say to the world, we are a 100% renewable energy economy, that's a major business attractor for this state.
Late today, Denison Independent Andrew Wilkie indicated he would support the carbon tax legislation. Mr Wilkie's vote now means the government has enough support for the package to pass Parliament. And a reminder, ABC News will have a 1-hour special on Sunday night at 7 p.m. following the Prime Minister's carbon tax announcement.